Thank you so much for being here. We're going to have a great time. I've entitled this seminar that I put together some time ago, Taming the Beast of Washington, and you're about to find out why. As we engage one another, we debate with one another over the next 2 hours or so. I believe we have this up and rolling. Can we go to the next slide? Does anybody have any idea what this is? Expand. You always got the engineer in the crowd. It's not just metal. Expanded metal. What? Any other guesses? A filter? Barbecue grill? This is a piece of the wall that came down in East Germany. In 1989, the wall came down, and in 1990, I was living about 30 miles south of what was then the East German border. And for me, this was a special moment. I was able to go up to where the wall was. This is how I got this, obviously. And the reason why it was a special moment was because many things clicked for me. I grew up in a family that bled red, white, and blue. My mother came from Switzerland when she was 9 years old. She had 2 siblings, and her mother and father said, "We're selling everything we have. You can pack 1 suitcase, and that's all you're bringing." And they boarded the ship, and they came to the United States because they wanted to relish and felt they could in the spirit of America. And so for me, even though we talked about freedom, we talked about the Constitution, for me, this was one of those moments where you sit back and say, we really are an exceptional country. We really do offer principles that are different. We embrace principles that are different. Because the thought that came to me as a young man was simply this: if what you have to offer is so good, why is it that you feel like you have to put a wall around to keep your people there? And it came together for me. We don't have people leaving our country on small ships going to Cuba, going to other countries. Quite the contrary, we have people literally risking their lives to come here. And so I'm thinking about American exceptionalism and about the fact that we have so many people apologizing for America. Our own president saying, well, if we're exceptional, then perhaps we're exceptional on the same level as Greece feels they're exceptional, or Italy feels they're exceptional. On my radio show, some of you have heard this, but I feel it's worth replaying here. On my radio show last week, I played a clip from the newsroom. And this is a new show that's being aired on HBO. And it's produced by Aaron Sorkin. Aaron Sorkin is a liberal. He means what he says. He believes what he says. And during one of these shows, he plays something that is very powerful. In fact, it's so powerful that I had conservatives back in Arizona that actually believed this stuff. It was so well done, so persuasively done, that even the people that are on our side were buying into the nonsense. There was this inability to be critical about what they were hearing. Let me play this for you. Again, this is a debate that's going on during the newsroom. Again, it's just a show. And these actors, you have one actor lining up as a conservative, another actor lining up as a liberal, and someone who's middle of the road. And the question from the crowd is this: what makes America exceptional? And a conservative answers the question, the liberal answers the question, and then the moderate, Aaron Sorkin wants to appear to be the voice of reason. So the moderate says, we aren't exceptional. We aren't exceptional anymore. And here is what he says.
Statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies. Now,
They threw out all the data, right? We perform poorly in math, we perform poorly in literacy, we perform poorly in science. Therefore, America is not great. The only three areas apparently that America leads is in incarcerated individuals, people that believe angels are real, and then one other, whatever category he decided to throw out. No, actually, there's a lot of other categories that America leads the world in. Let me ask you, if you had to defend the idea of America being exceptional, what would you say? Raise of hand, what would you say? Back in the back. Hold on one second. Do we have a microphone back here?
Just what he said, giving.
Giving. Okay,
Giving,
in terms of?
yes. Of disaster relief to Haiti, earthquakes, that type of thing.
Okay, America is always rising up. America is always stepping up to help out. What else would you say? Yes, right up here up front. Say that again.
Technological innovation and patents issue.
Excellent. Does anybody know how many patents are enforced in the United States today? As of last year, 1.8 million. Do you want to know the country that's in second place today? China. We have 25% of China's population, yet we exceed them by over 100% when it comes to patents enforced. Why? It's because America is exceptional. It allows for free enterprise. It allows for innovation. It allows for creativity. And we have a constitution in place that mandates that the government protect those things. Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8 mandates and gives the U.S. Congress the power to legislate in order to protect patents, copyrights, trademarks. That's the job of the government. And we're being told that, well, you don't own that. You didn't make that. Right? What is the philosophical underpinning going on under there? If you didn't make it and we all made it, I now have a legitimate basis to take it away from you because you don't really own it. There's something going on here. But patents enforced, thank you for that. What else? Yes. Yes, in the back there in the gray.
Medical research.
Research.
Medical research, AIDS research, all the cures that go on throughout the world.
Excellent. Think about this in terms of research citations. Right now, I'm not a doctor, but research citations are important to look at when analyzing where the innovation is coming from. Scientists rely on various sources to determine where can I move forward with this experiment. What are others saying about this? What ideas can I take and incorporate and move forward with this to make my ideas that I'm embracing even better? The United States of America last year produced over 39 million citations. 39 million scientific citations. Take a wild guess at the second country, Japan. We beat them by over 600%. 600%. We beat all of the 5 countries that follow us. Them combined, we beat them. So don't tell me that the only area that we lead the world in is the number of incarcerated criminals, because it's untrue. See, but we had people buying into this idea. We had people buying into it, people that believe like you and me because it was so persuasively done. It sounds good. It sounds persuasive. And what we're here to do and what we've been doing for the last 3 days is creating constitutional technicians. That's what I call this. We're literally creating constitutional technicians, people that understand how to defend the thing that we claim to believe in, namely the Constitution and principles of freedom. Did you see what basis he used to defend the idea that America is not exceptional? One of the things that he threw out there was literacy. He said, well, I don't know what he said. He said, what, we're 24th in literacy? Does anybody want to take a wild guess let's just assume for the sake of argument the data is correct. What country leads the world in literacy? Yes, Cuba. Cuba. See, he didn't think you were going to look up the data, right? Cuba, let's just assume for the sake of argument that the data that Aaron Sorkin is using is correct. And Cuba leads the world in literacy. So does that make Cuba exceptional? Because that's the argument he's making. We're not exceptional because we fall into these categories. No, people aren't going to Cuba. People aren't risking their lives to go to Cuba. People from Cuba, the country that leads the world in literacy apparently, are risking their lives to come here. See, Aaron Sorkin doesn't get it, and many Americans don't get it. There's, of the 10 top universities in the country, in the world, how many are here in the United States? 8. 8 of the 10 are right here in the United States. And take a guess, a look at this. Of those 8, how many would you guess are private? All of them. All of them. You see, here's what Aaron Sorkin's trying to tell you. He's trying to say, I want government to be involved when it comes to educating your children. I like the Department of Education. I think that they should embrace this thing and move forward and establish standard curriculum for every school across the country. But let me ask you, here's the problem. Is it Aaron Sorkin, the individual who believes that our schools should be teaching children how to put condoms on bananas? Or is the problem those that believe in constitutional adherence, that believe government should stay out of the business of education and let the private industry do the job? See, he's using something that he agrees with, government, but using the product of what he agrees with to show why we're not great. You can't have it both ways. Either government should be involved or they shouldn't. If they are going to be involved, deal with the data. Deal with the data as it is. What I want to really spend some time is learning how to defend these things. Taming the Beast of Washington was a seminar that I created about a year ago because people are asking this question: how do we hold these people accountable? How do we really hold them accountable? Because what we've gotten to is to a place in time where we simply trust our representatives. We think that if they're running for office and they got the resources to run for office, well, the heck, they must understand the Constitution. I'm going to show you, if you don't already know, they quite frankly don't. They don't understand the principles of the Constitution. They don't understand what it means to be free. They don't understand why we live in a republic and not a democracy. They don't even understand how many articles are in the Constitution. They don't even understand that our Constitution is not just one of negative powers, it is primarily one of positive powers. They don't understand these things. I'm going to teach these things to you today, but let me warn you. What I'm going to ask you to do is to go back to your areas of the country and to implement what I'm about to show you. And it will not be easy. It will not be easy. Why? Brian Berkland, are you in the crowd here? Brian, will you come up here for a second? He didn't know I was going to do this. I have to tell you about this man. Let me show you how powerful it is. Let me show you how powerful the content that I'm about to show you is. Brian Berkland began coming to my seminars about 2 years ago. He's from Arizona. And as I started teaching him this sort of thing, he was considered quite the rabble-rouser because he was going into these meet and greets. He was going into these political forums and asking the questions that I'm going to outline for you today. This man had the opportunity to go to a closed-door meeting with an individual running for one of the most powerful positions, take that back, for the most powerful position in the world. It was a presidential candidate. I will not tell you his name. I will simply illustrate the principle here. He was invited to a closed-door meeting. And these people were doing what sheep do. They're asking questions just for the sake of asking the question. They weren't asking the questions that really mattered, that allowed us to really assess where he stands on the principles of the Constitution and the principles of freedom. And so at one point, Brian stands up after all of these questions are being asked, says, "Sir, you know what? I appreciate all the questions that are being asked, but let me ask what I feel is the most important question that hasn't been asked and has been overlooked." And he says this: "Can you tell me where in the Constitution you derive your authority to act as president?" This man didn't know. This man, you know. This man was attempting to garner your vote, telling you, I want to be president of the United States, but did not know where in the Constitution he derives his authority. This is pathetic. And we've allowed this to happen. See, he's not the problem, and the president's not the problem, and the United States Congress is not the problem, and the U.S. Supreme Court is not the problem. The problem is us. We've allowed this to happen. If you believe in the idea of popular sovereignty, that is, the power begins with the people, and the individuals in office derive their authority to lead through the consent of the governed. If you believe in that idea, we must take responsibility. We've allowed this to happen, and if you want to take this back, I'm going to show you the poison. I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, what I have to tell you is that Brian, he threw an analogy back at you. He says, well, you know what, I don't know. I don't know. But you know what? It's kind of like being a pilot. It's kind of like being a pilot. I'm up in the air. The landing gear is not coming down. Oh, shoot. Let me take a look at the checklist. How do you do it? Didn't he throw that back at you, Brian? What did you say to him? See, this is great stuff. It's God works in mysterious ways. What happened?
He plain and simply tried to refute the entire Constitution to me through an aviation analogy, not knowing that I'm a pilot and a flight instructor, right? He said there's some pilots that forget to put down the landing gear, and you see all these guys come in. So I don't know what he was just trying to refute what I said to him about not knowing where his authority comes from. But I basically told him, hey, that's why we have checklists, is to go through here, make sure everything is correct before you land. And it's especially important to use these checklists if there's an emergency or if you got a complex situation going on. You don't need to memorize all of these things. You just have them written down for you right here, these baseline things that you need to cover, and you're all set to handle these situations.
Yeah. So, yeah. So a pilot doesn't take a look at the checklist once they're up in the air. I mean, he looks at the checklist before he even gets in the airplane and starts the thing up, right? So why are we requiring anything different? Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you. See, if you wouldn't let somebody get in your airplane and fly you without knowing that they have a knowledge of the checklist, tell me why we're letting people lead this country who don't understand the checklist. This is what's going on. This is absolutely what's going on. And I'm going to show you a number of clips as we move through here of politicians telling you about what they think they know about the Constitution, whether it's important or not, and then, of course, their interpretation. Can we go to the next slide? You have individuals in Washington, D.C., all the way down to local dog catcher, that don't understand the principles of freedom. They abuse their authority, they disregard the Constitution, and they violated their oath. They have violated their oath. The oath means nothing to them. But this is a trust. Any lawyers here? Any lawyers here? One lawyer. Any others? Two. At least 3, 4. There's 4 of them brave enough to say they're lawyers. But I'm not going to hire this lawyer today. I'm not hiring any of those lawyers. What is your name? Michael. We got a mic coming up, slowly but surely. Michael, where are you from? Montgomery, Alabama. Montgomery, Alabama, is that a great place? All right, okay, Michael. What do you do for a living?
I'm a retired Air Force officer.
Very good. Any veterans here? If you're a veteran, will you stand up? Thank you for your service. My hope is that I never forget that the reason why we can come here and do the things that we do, why we can speak out against government, why we can tell these people in D.C. that they're not doing the things that need to be done without worrying about being arrested, taken into custody, or any of the above, is the fact that we have these men and women who have literally put their lives on the line to ensure that freedom of speech is protected. The ability to come together and assemble. So, Michael, you're a retired Air Force officer. No, actually today you're my lawyer. And I come to you and I have $1 million. You said, uh-oh?
You're in trouble.
I have $1 million. And I want to place that $1 million in trust. I'm the trustor, he's the trustee. So I outlined all of the instructions for him. I said, here's what you're going to do with the $1 million. And then I sign on the dotted line, and he signs as well. Michael, what do you do with the trust?
I follow what the agreement was.
That's not actually what you do. He says he follows the trust. What he actually does is takes $50,000 of this. You see the Mercedes he was driving today? It's not his, it's actually mine. He takes $50,000 of my money and buys him a car. See, in our society, Michael would go to jail. He stole $50,000 that didn't belong to him. And so he would be prosecuted in our society for this. Now watch this. You have 535 men in Congress. You have a member of an executive branch who's appointed and a number of cabinet members. You have 9 Supreme Court justices, what I call scorpions in a bottle. These individuals have taken an oath. See, they've signed on to the trust. They signed on to the trust. We are the trustors. Popular sovereignty. The power begins with us. We're loaning a little bit of our authority to them. The authority, the power begins with us. And yet what happens when they violate, as the trustee, the trust? They get to keep their job, make lots of money, and have a nice pension waiting for them. There is something terribly, terribly, terribly wrong with this picture. Michael goes to jail for taking $50,000 of mine. These people get to keep their jobs, undermining the freedom of the people. How do we take this back? It begins right here. If 56 men could change this country, a crowd like this, coming from probably every state in the country, can change this place. Absolutely. Listen, I'm telling you, that's not just a cute soundbite. That's not one of those rah-rah things. It really isn't. Because I've already seen it happening in Arizona. You people that are from Arizona know exactly what I'm talking about. The academy has taken Arizona by storm, and the politicians don't like it. I'm not kidding at all. They do not like this. I got a call last night from Arizona. There was a group putting together a meet and greet earlier this week. They had invited a number of political candidates to come be a part of this meet and greet. These people are going to take the stage, they're going to advocate their position, and then they're going to open it up to questions. Every single one of these candidates said, if you want us to come, we want the questions first. It makes me angry. You know why it makes me angry? Is because this group conceded. They gave in. They said, we want you guys here. See, it was more about drawing numbers than it was standing on principle. How ridiculous is this? I know there's a lot of business owners here. Would you say, you know what, I want to interview you? And he said, oh, thanks so much for the interview. But you know what, before that interview, I'd like a list of the questions you're going to ask me. It sounds absurd because it is absurd. The reason why we ask questions and don't tell them beforehand is because we want to see how they respond on the fly. We want to see what they really believe. We want to see what is it that you really believe, and how are you going to integrate the Constitution and the principles of freedom into the issue that I'm addressing. Let me give you one example. Social Security. This is coming later, but let me give you a teaser here. Sir, you're running for one of the most powerful positions in the country. I'd like to address the issue of Social Security. Can you tell me whether or not Social Security is constitutional? If your answer is no, can you outline for me utilizing the Constitution as your framework to tell us why and what you'll do to address it once you go back to D.C.? See, what you've just done is very powerful. You forced them to, number one, answer the question using the Constitution as their framework. It's not, hey, well, how are you going to fix Social Security? You're going to fix it? Now they can go anywhere they want, as opposed to saying, is Social Security unconstitutional? And if your answer is no, tell us what you will do using the Constitution as your framework to address the issue once you go back to D.C. I'm telling you right now, 99% of the individuals running for office in this country could not answer that question. And I'm going to give you a whole slew of other questions that fit in the same category. This is the way that you build a country. This is the way you retake a country. Now, we're talking a lot about the Constitution. Of course, there's that counter that Chad and James Robinson and Jay Richards brought so eloquently to the table. And we can talk about this all day long, but there has to be a spiritual revival just the same. It has to go hand in hand. So I'm bringing this component of the inspired Constitution to you to show you what we can do to take this thing back. But one of the problems is this. The greatest of all trust must be protected, and any breach must impose a serious sanction. That primarily means making sure they lose their job. And so going back to this idea of courage, the reason why this will take courage is because you will be booed. You will be shouted at. You will be told to just sit down. I've seen it. I have seen this with my own eyes. You are going to have to be the sheepdogs that stand up and say, this is the way you rebuild a country. It's not by taking your one issue and moving forward with your one issue and seeing how this candidate's going to respond. We've got to start asking questions differently. Next slide. I want to talk about just a few tactical components to this before we get into some of these questions. There's a small group setting and there's a large group setting. Obviously, if you're in a small group setting, that's much different. It's to your advantage. Because when you have somebody in your home with 10, 15, 20 people, you have him captive. You have her captive and can ask the questions you want. But what about large group settings? You need to go back and talk to your Tea Party groups, your Republican clubs, your conservative groups, and you need to start coming up with a game plan and saying, you know what, we need to go after this person. We need to make sure they can answer these questions. We had this happen about 2 months ago in Arizona. There was a group that asked me to go to dinner with them. They said, we've got this particular candidate coming to our forum. We want to work together to make sure that questions that we put forward are answered. Okay. So we met, and I let them go to work. And if you could have seen what happened during this forum, it would have blown you away. It would have convinced you that what I'm telling you is the truth. Because they asked about 15 questions, 12, 15 questions. He got one right. He got one right. And they all pertained to the Constitution and principles of freedom. So they had one individual stand up and say, sir, you're running for Congress. Can you tell me where you derive your authority to act as a congressman in the Constitution? The next person got up and said, sir, can you tell us where your grants of authority are found in the Constitution itself? Found in Article 1, Section 8. He didn't know. Sir, there are actually 20 grants of authority in Article 1, Section 8. That is 20 things that you have the authority to do, granted to you in the Constitution. Would you be so kind as to name 5 of the 20? Couldn't name one. In fact, they were willing to bargain with him a little bit. You can't name 5, can you at least name 3? Couldn't name them. They move on and say, there's a number of things that the Constitution says you can't do. Can you name one of them? Can you tell us what a bill of attainder is? Can you tell us what an ex post facto law is? Can you tell us what habeas corpus is? He didn't know. He didn't know, and neither do 99% of the people in office today. They don't know. And we wonder why we've gotten into this mess. The National Defense Authorization Act is a direct violation of Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, which speaks to habeas corpus. Well, they don't even know what it is. So why should it matter? So long as the majority agrees in Congress, well, they'll get the job done, apparently. And they'll run right over you and me, and they'll trample, and they'll spit, and they'll defecate, and they'll urinate literally all over this Constitution. And we've allowed this to happen. It's time to take this thing back. So let me show you some... So as we go through some of these questions, I want you to be thinking, how am I going to go back and incorporate this? By the way, we'll talk about this a little later on, but we've literally had scores of individuals come to us and say, will you come back to our area of the country? We absolutely will. I'll sleep on a cot out in the field if that's what needs to happen, because that's how important this message is. We will come back to where you're at, and we will make this happen. We will help you put this into place. I've developed over 6 seminars. Each one of those seminars is over 8 hours long. This Taming the Beast of Washington is actually an additional 7th seminar. It is 8 hours. You're getting about 2 hours and 45 minutes of it. Generally, what we do in a seminar like this is when we get into the latter half, we do mock congressional hearings where I make you get up here and make the arguments as a group. And it's just a lot of fun. I have to tell you, the people that are joining us for the first time today, I shared this the other day to show you how powerful this can be. I was invited to go out and do leadership training in Arizona. So for the Arizona State Republican Leadership Group. All of the state chairman, and then all of the county chairmen, and then some of the precinct committeemen and the chairman for those various groups. So we went up into Payson, and I spent 3 hours training these people. And the idea was to set them straight, to let them know you're focusing on important issues, but they're not the most important issues. Let's focus on the most important issues, and those other issues will resolve themselves. See, that's what we're forgetting. We get so tied up on our one issue, and we get so excited about it, and that's the only thing that's important. But we forget about the bigger picture. Do you realize if we resolve the bigger picture, everything else resolves itself for the most part? If you have a Congress and a president and a Supreme Court that understands what it means to uphold the Constitution, it resolves itself. And so we went out there, and for the last hour, I did what is called mock congressional hearings. I took every one of those leaders, I put them in small groups, and I said, here's your issue. You're going to argue this. I want you to get up and tell us why we're a republic, not a democracy. And then I gave another group an issue. And I gave them a number of issues, and I put them up in front of the class with everyone else there, all their other leaders. And we grilled them like nobody's business. And they left there understanding that they don't know as much as they think they know. Right? It was the idea was to help divert them back to where they need to be. That's how powerful this is. Putting them in place, and it was an honor to be invited to do something like that, but I was hell-bent on making my point that we need to stop focusing on silly little issues and get back to the bigger issue. So next slide. Phrasing questions. We ask questions to establish the framework of the discussion. We press the issue to get to the truth. That's why these large group settings, getting together with people you know and say, hey, I'm not suggesting that we need to rough these guys up and be disrespectful. That's not at all what I'm advocating. I'm simply advocating that we need to put pressure on them. And we need to ask the right questions. And this is what's going to begin happening. We're already seeing it in Arizona. They're going to go back and they're asking for these booklets that you have. I've given you a small version of what I give out there. They want a copy of it. Give us a copy. Now they're starting to memorize them. They think they've won the battle. Not even close. They don't realize that the academy is 5 steps ahead of them. We're way ahead of these people. You can memorize the answers all you want, but we got something else in place. So when you do get the answers right, we're coming back at you. We had a young lady contact us and says, I'm going to a meet and greet. I'm concerned that this person has access to some of your information. I want to ask a different question pertaining to taxation. Can we talk about it? This was the question. Can you tell us what the parameters for taxation are under Article 1, Section 8? Can you tell us what the parameters are? When can you tax? Second, can you tell us what we can do to constitutionally override the U.S. Supreme Court's decision? Took him for a loop. There were 5 candidates plus. Not one knew the answer. Isn't that a shame? We're taxing and taxing and taxing, and yet we have individuals that don't understand the parameters for taxation. So does it surprise us that they consider it a tax and tax and tax? They don't understand. Article 1 outlines those things. Next slide. Next slide, or next one here. There you go. If you want to just outline purpose of government, next, and next. So here are some of the questions. Some of these are very simple. They're very simple, but nevertheless, Most could not answer the question. So, sir, you're running for office. Can you tell us what the purpose of government is? Can anyone tell us what the purpose of government is? What is its purpose? Yes. She says protection, go ahead. Protection of individual liberty. So hold on, you're not done. Not done.
Oops.
How does the government protect individual liberty?
Through their enumerated powers.
Say this again.
Through their enumerated powers.
Through their enumerated powers. Okay? Example.
The federal government you're talking about?
Yes.
The federal government has the right to a national defense.
Okay? And so how does the national defense protect individual liberty?
It protects us being invaded from foreign
Okay?
powers.
Good. Fair enough. What else? Anyone have another example of how the government protects individual liberty? Yes. Hold on.
Through due process, it punishes those who infringe on other people's rights.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Through due process, what do? We ensure that certain measures are in place to protect those individuals that are accused by government. I see we've forgotten about this, and we've been sucked into this whole idea of the National Defense Authorization Act. You've got to know what this is, I would assume. National Defense Authorization Act was signed off by Congress, signed on by the President, and it simply says this: if the government identifies you as a terrorist, they can hold you indefinitely until the hostilities subside. See, what's the problem with that? Due process is a problem. Yeah, there's this idea of the writ of habeas corpus, and there's a problem not understanding the idea of a republic versus a democracy. See, but here's what they were doing back in Arizona. But Americans are exempt. Americans are exempt under the National Defense Authorization Act, to which you should be responding irrelevant. If we believe in the idea of a republic, it's absolutely irrelevant whether Americans are exempt. Because I didn't see in the Declaration of Independence that all American citizens are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. It says all persons, all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Which means that any time the government is going to infringe on an unalienable right of an individual, you better be careful, you better tread delicately. And our Constitution has measures in place to ensure that unalienable rights of the people are not infringed upon. See, that's the philosophy of government. It's a great question to ask a candidate. Tell us what you believe the philosophy of government is, sir. Philosophy of government is, what is it? What do you think the philosophy of government is? Any ideas? Looking back at our original intent, what is the philosophy of government? You got to know this. Philosophy of government's outlined in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. See, that's our philosophy. There's nothing sophisticated about this, but go out and ask a candidate who's someone who's trying to garner your vote, what do you believe the philosophy of government is? And I'm telling you, you probably won't be able to answer it. Doesn't it disturb you that you have individuals trying to garner your vote that are sitting in office that don't understand the very foundation? They don't understand what our philosophy is. If you don't understand our philosophy, it's very difficult to legislate. It's very difficult to enforce. It's very difficult to interpret. You don't understand where we came from and why we're here when it comes to government. As David Barton said, you don't understand the birth certificate. It's very difficult to keep this country alive. So the philosophy of government is very simple. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. What are those? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. There's your philosophy. Take that back. You're going to start getting people begin thinking differently. But what is the purpose? The purpose is in the very next sentence. It's in the very next sentence of the Declaration. that to secure these rights, what rights? Well, the rights we just mentioned, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's the purpose of government. That to secure those rights, not take them away, not find ways to infringe upon them, to secure them. And then it raises a great question. This is a fun one. I do this with my college students all the time, see, because I teach out at a college in Arizona, teach constitutional law, and I love it. The reason why? Because the majority of my students walking into my classrooms are liberals. Yeah. And so we start out by asking them, hey, what do you think the philosophy of government is? It's to take care of the people. Really? Is that the job of government? And I'll ask them, what do you think is more important? Public safety or individual liberty? Try that one on for size. I'm telling you that the majority of individuals in office today would probably tell you, if you push them hard enough, that public safety is more important than individual liberty. If they didn't believe that, tell me why we've got the Patriot Act. Tell me why we have the National Defense Authorization Act, because they sold it to the American people by telling you, you should be scared because everybody wants to kill you. But in a free society, we say, you know what? With freedom comes risk. See, with this Colorado shooting that just went on, we're going to have fun tomorrow, by the way, when we do Second Amendment in action. See, what we're being told is we've got to do something about this. Yeah, we do. You know what it's called? It's called fostering an environment, promoting an environment where people want and need to learn about how to handle a gun appropriately. See, that's how you correct the problem, is telling people they need to learn. And they need to educate themselves, not by fostering an environment that says guns are bad, you're going to kill yourself. See, that's the very problem that they created. The people who are saying you shouldn't have firearms are dealing with the results of the problem they created. See, because if we were abiding by constitutional principles and principles of freedom and the Second Amendment, and you're listening to somebody like Thomas Jefferson or James Madison or George Washington, we would still have problems. You're always going to have people who kill other people. But I don't think that we would see it to the degree that we see it today if we were promoting an environment of really embracing training, embracing understanding, embracing proficiency. But we don't do that. So here you have the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to secure the liberty. And this is really a great question, because I taught a class, well, my last class 2 semesters ago. 2 semesters ago, I had 32 students in my class. And I asked them, public safety or individual rights? 30 of them said public safety is more important. 2 of them said individual liberty is more important. Well, of course, at the end of 16 weeks, what did we have? We had 32 students in there that were liberal coming into it, understanding that, okay, individual liberty is more important. It's a process. It's absolutely a process to show them why individual liberty is more important, because what I basically told them is, excuse me, if you want public safety, go to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia will give you all the public safety you want, so long as you do what they say. Individual liberty does not exist. You just do what the government says. See, that's what the ultimate implications are of public safety being the default position. And what we need to be sure that we're doing is getting individuals in office who recognize that the default position is individual liberty, and that we're willing to take the risk as a result of being a free people. So, great question in terms of the purpose of government. Do we have our slideshow up here? There we go. The next one is the purpose of the Constitution. What would you say the purpose of the Constitution is? Anybody? What's the purpose of our... Yes, over here. Hold on here.
All right, got it now?
There we go.
The purpose of the Constitution is to protect the people from the government.
Now, very good. So we're going to hear them say this. The purpose of the Constitution is to protect the people from the government. Hold on. How does the Constitution do this?
It really limits and delineates what the government is allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. What's not mentioned is left to the states and the people.
All right. So you have the structure of the Constitution, tells them what they can do. It also lists some things they can't do. Those things that are not granted to the federal government are reserved to states and the people. Where do we hear this? Where do we read this?
I can't remember.
10th Amendment, right? And this is what I call matching bookends. Let me show you how this works. This is unbelievable. This is one of our congressmen. Well, any South Carolinians here? This is your guy right here. This is your problem right here. This is Congressman Clyburn. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You kidding me? So here he is. He's having an interview with Andrew Napolitano. And here we go.
Where in the Constitution is the federal government charged with maintaining people's health?
Well, there's not in the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the federal government has got anything to do with most of the stuff that we do.
Did you just hear that? Did you hear this? He says, this is a great question, by the way. Take any issue you want and begin it with the way that he asked it, because that's really what I'm advocating. Take your issue that you are interested in, that you're concerned about, and put it in the framework of the Constitution. You see what he did? He said, where in the Constitution do you have the authority to enact something like health care? And his response, well, it's not in the Constitution. Probably most of what we do in D.C. isn't authorized by the Constitution. You heard it. That was him. That was him. And we've let this nonsense happen. See, the people out in South Carolina got to do something about this. Right? And this guy is not the exception. He's the rule. He is absolutely the rule. Let's go on. Listen to this.
The federal government's got nothing in the Constitution to do with education. But I tell you what, if the federal government had not stepped into education, I don't think my parents would have ever gotten one. My father was denied a high school education because of state law. The federal government had to step in and say, you cannot do that to African Americans.
Well, it was the federal courts that stepped in. Thanks be to God that caused you to get the education you did. But if the Constitution doesn't authorize the federal government to have a Department of Education or to take care of people's health care, what's the sense of having it? You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. You can't go outside the Constitution because you think it's a good thing to do without violating that oath.
How about show me where in the Constitution it prohibits the federal government from doing this?
So here he counters. He comes up with a counter here. By the way, can I ask, I see that I actually have more than 40 minutes left, right? We have all day. We'll go all day. We'll go all day. Into the night. Absolutely. So listen to his counter. This is important because here's another question to be learned. He says, there's nothing in the Constitution that says we can't. How would you, somebody tell me how you would respond to this argument? Then I'm going to show you something very powerful that we can start asking these people running for office. Yes, right here. Hold on one second.
Where in the Constitution do you find those that say you can and can't do this?
Huh? Okay, hold on. What is your name?
Gary.
Gary. So, talk about this a little bit. What are you getting at? So Congressman Clyburn is saying, where in the Constitution does it say we can't? And your response is?
Where in the Constitution does it say you can?
Okay.
What are
well,
your...
he would say, here's what he would say. Just like President Obama said not too long ago, the Constitution is one of primarily negative powers. That's what he would say. The Constitution, my understanding, is one of negative powers. How would you respond to this?
Where in the Constitution do you find that?
That's a good question. Because then he would say, oh, yeah, I guess that is a problem. See, here's what he forgot to do. And here's what most congressmen forget to do. They forgot to read Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. They forgot to read the very first paragraph of the Constitution. Article 1, Section 1 says this, and memorize this. This is how you build a country. This is how you change a country, by understanding what's in that document. It says, all legislative powers herein granted are vested in a Congress consisting of the House of Representatives and the Senate. In other words, we're giving you authority. And you dimwit, if you forget or fail to read any of that, I put a matching bookend here, just in case you forgot. And it's called the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment says, those powers that we didn't give you, stay with us. They stay with the states and the people. See, Congressman Clyburn had no idea what he was talking about. He is a fool. He never knows what he's talking about, she says. The South Carolinian comes to her defense. I didn't do this. Somebody else did. So here we go. Article 1, Section 1 says that authority is vested. 10th Amendment says those powers not given to you. Do you see how powerful this is? Do you see the question that can be asked? Do you believe that the Constitution, sir, is one of negative powers or positive powers? Make him answer. Make him answer. We're going to get into much more detailed questions, but I think they should be able to answer these foundational questions. And if they can't understand these foundational questions, go somewhere else. Don't try and garner your vote here. Go get a job somewhere else, because my position is this. If you want to change this country, we have to find people that understand and can articulate the principles of the Constitution just as well as the people who wrote it. That's how we've got to find these people. Okay, so we've talked about the purpose of government, secure the rights of the people. We've talked about the fact that what is the purpose of the Constitution is to ensure that government remains limited, because under a limited government, those are the best options through which we can avoid tyranny. You limit government. And how is the Constitution limited government? How is the Constitution limited government? Well, no, I'm not asking how the Constitution has been distorted to avoid having a limited government. I'm saying, how does the text preserve limited government? How does it do this? Who said this? You said through enumerated powers. Now tell me what you mean by this.
I'm not that up on Constitution, but in the different sections, I think it's in Article 1 or whatever, it tells you, this is what the duties of the House is, this is the duties of the Senate, this is the duties of the President, this is the duties of the Supreme Court. And if we follow that guideline, we will be able to limit the government.
Very good. So it really goes back to what we were just talking about. Government remains limited, or at least is supposed to be limited, based on the principles outlined in the Constitution itself. The Constitution, for those of you that haven't been with us for the last couple of days, let me outline for you something that will literally change the way you look at the Constitution, and it will change the way you talk about the Constitution. What I'm about to teach you, I believe, will change everything for you. How many articles are in the Constitution? 7. There are 7 articles in the Constitution. How many amendments are there? Yes, 27 amendments. Now, Article 1 speaks to what? Article 1 speaks to the legislative branch. Article 2 speaks to what? You can hear all the people that were here. Executive branch. And Article 3 speaks to judicial. Here's why this is so powerful. Article 1 outlines, specifically Article 1, Section 8, outlines 20 grants of authority that Congress has. 20. That's it. Then you go to Article 2, the executive branch, the president. He has 6 grants of authority. And then you go to Article 3, the judicial branch. It outlines the jurisdiction component, what types of cases it can hear. Now, here's why this is so powerful. You're talking with your friend, family member, your neighbor, your coworker. You're talking with that somebody who's attempting to garner your vote. The question is, will you have the courage to say, you know what, that's an interesting idea. Can you tell me where the legislative branch has that authority in Article 1? The president's moving forward with this action. Well, wait a second. Can you tell me where in Article 2 the president has the authority to do this? Well, the Supreme Court or the Ninth Circuit, they're up to their thing again. They're doing this. Well, wait a second. What does the Article 3 have to say about this? See how powerful this is? See, I've just given you the ammunition to literally change the dynamic of the discussion going on in this country. And I'm telling you, this sort of thing that we're talking about today will change this country. This will take the country by storm, and people wanting your vote are not going to like it, because most of those people are more interested in a title, more interested in a position, than they are necessarily upholding the things that you and I expect them to uphold. So this is powerful. So the next time that guy gets up and says, hey, this is what I stand for, stop him and say, where in Article 1 do you have the authority to do this? Right? You're trying to get us to buy onto this idea. See, but here's the temptation, and here's why it takes courage. Here's what's going to happen. And you will get booed, because there's going to be a great idea being discussed in one of your Tea Party meetings, your Republican club, in your church, whatever. There's going to be a great idea floating around. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand up and you're going to say, hey, where in Article 1 do you actually have the authority to do this? And they're going to boo you, because the idea is good. Why are we debating this whole idea of the Constitution? Is the idea good? See, that's where we've come to. Even the Tea Party movement has come to this point. Right? The Tea Party movement is beginning to fracture. We're forgetting what it is that we originally stood for, and we're starting to say, hey, what ideas are good? As opposed to saying, what does the Constitution permit me to do? What is the original intent? What are the historical influences? We're disregarding those things when we have an agenda in mind. And what I'm saying is, you either believe in a Republican form of government and you believe in the Constitution, or you don't. And if you believe in the constitutional form of government, it means that you will lose some battles. So I'm sitting on a panel about a year and a half ago. They were discussing health care. This is powerful. Discussing health care, and there are 3 doctors, an insurance agent, and me. And the doctors are talking about it's a good idea, it's a bad idea. Insurance agent, bad idea, what? They're going back and forth, and I'm thinking, pick me. Right? I'm ready to talk. And I got up and said, for the last hour, you people have been talking about whether health care is a good idea or a bad idea. You guys are all wrong. That's not how you analyze these issues. I said, we don't ask ourselves whether an idea is good or bad until we've established whether or not the idea is constitutional or not. See, but these people have their own agenda. And you start talking about somebody, whether an idea is good or bad. In America, guess who wins those arguments? The person who yells the loudest. But what I'm suggesting is come back and start playing on a field that most Americans aren't able to play on. I'm saying let's change the dynamic of the discussion, and you are the sheepdogs that can make this happen. You are the sheepdogs that will make this happen. You've got to go back and start saying, we've got to redirect our discussion. Well, you know what, guys? We've been doing this for a while, but I'm telling you, we got some work to do here. We've got to change how we're talking about things. See, because in early 2000, there was a piece of legislation going through the United States Congress, and it said this: all those working as attorneys in the public sector will have their student loans forgiven. Do you think I like that idea? I work in the public sector. I'm an attorney in the public sector. You think I like that? You better believe it. It means more money in my pocket if my student loans are forgiven. But what's the problem? I began debating and discussing the idea on the basis of whether it was good or bad, not whether it was constitutional or not. See, that's why we've got the mess we've got, is because we keep asking ourselves, is it a good idea, is it a bad idea? Oh, it sounds like a great idea, move forward with it. And now we've got 250 bureaucratic agencies that do anything they want. They hold the powers to legislate, enforce, and interpret the law directly in violation of the Constitution, because at some point, someone said, this sounded good, let's do it. Right? This is how you take a country back, is by doing and articulating and arguing just as the Founding Fathers did. What we are doing here today, make no mistake about it, this is what patriots used to do. This is what they used to do. This is how they used to talk. This is how they used to debate. This is how they engaged one another. Hey, you got this idea. Well, hey, wait a second. What does the Constitution say about this? And now we're debating. Changing that dynamic of the discussion going on in this country. We've talked a little bit about popular sovereignty. A great question to ask is, what do you recognize popular sovereignty to be? Okay? What do they understand it? Where does it come from? Because remember, we've outlined the philosophy of government. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these being life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. There's your philosophy. What's our purpose? The very next sentence. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Guess what the next principle is? The very next portion of that sentence is popular sovereignty. Deriving those powers to secure the rights of the people from the consent of the governed. That's popular sovereignty. Do they recognize that the power that they hold literally comes from you and that they're accountable to you? We need to ensure that they understand this, because we've got this huge, ginormous government that believes they're the end-all, be-all, and that they're just trampling over us peons. That's what they believe. It's all about a title or a position. We've talked about American exceptionalism, and we've talked about rights. For you, those